All right. So thank you everybody for coming today. This is the first meeting of the Climate Adaptation Collaborative component of the Regional DEDM MVP Action Grant for FY23. And we really appreciate your participation. And for those of you who are able to complete the pre-workshop poll, thank you very much. We're going to be talking about a lot of those things today. Next slide. So I'm not going to have everybody introduce themselves verbally, but if everybody could add to the chat your name and the town that you are representing today, that would be fantastic. I want to make sure we get an accurate attendance. There is a lot that we want to get through today. We've got a couple of activities and we really want to make sure that we're making progress, as ultimately the end result from this project is hopefully a framework around which all of the Neponset River watershed towns can work together to pool resources for climate adaptation projects moving forward. So this is our very brief agenda. We'll get you out of here by 2:30. And I think the only people I will have introduced themselves right now are Van and Jeff, who will be doing the presentations. I am Carrie Snyder. I'm the Advocacy Director with the Neponset River Watershed Association. Jeff?
I'm Jeff Frisch. I'm the Watershed Resilience Planner from the Neponset River Watershed Association.
And Van?
Hi everyone, I'm Van, Senior Environmental Planner with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
And you'll be meeting some other NepRWA and MAPC staff in your breakout sessions towards the end. So next slide. So just as a brief reminder or summary for those of you who haven't attended one of our meetings before, we are working under a Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Project grant that encompasses the entire region. And the reason is because we've got all of these floodplains from Foxborough to Boston and Quincy, and none of them respect municipal borders. So we thought it would be great to get a regional flood model going and start talking across municipal borders about climate adaptation. Next slide. So this grant, it's a one-year grant. It will end in June of 2023. And it's got several components. So one component is creating a regional watershed-wide H&H model. So that we can model not only future flooding, but also future interventions that might reduce regional flooding. In DEDM, we're doing a pilot study and we're doing a deeper dive into one of DEDM's neighborhoods that we know experiences heavy flooding during rainstorms. We're also trying to develop a regional framework around which all of the towns in the Neponset River watershed can collaborate on climate adaptation. That's why you're here today. We'll also be doing a workshop in April to provide some technical assistance around some land use regulations that could be implemented to reduce flooding and to address some of the climate adaptation priorities that have already been identified by each of our watershed towns. And then finally, we're deepening community engagement throughout the watershed to make sure that residents and businesses are aware of what towns are doing around climate adaptation and make sure to really elevate those voices from EJ and climate vulnerable communities. So that is the project in a nutshell. You can go to neponset.org/climateadapt to find out more. And you can always email me with any additional questions. But in the interest of time, I'm going to hand it over to Van, I think, or Jeff, to start with our first activity.
Great. All right, let's warm up with some thinking. I promise it's not going to be hard. It's going to be fun. But many of you may have seen this before, but this is going to be an exercise we would like to see. So let's pretend the year is 2050 and all the communities in the Neponset River watershed have met their climate goals, whatever goals and priorities you've set out. So you're going to travel back to the future. To the present of 2023 right now. And you want to write yourself a note, you're from your future self to your current self, a note. The prompting questions is, what does the Neponset River watershed look like in 2050? What changes took place across communities to make it more sustainable and climate resilient? So with that, Julia, if you don't mind, drop the link to the question form in the chat. If everyone can click on that link, that will bring you to a form to start typing. It doesn't have to be poetic. It doesn't have to be, I mean, it can. Many of you are very talented, but feel free to start writing, you know, a small blurb, 3 or 4 sentences, kind of get your perspective on what does the Neponset look like in 2050, and what changes took place based on your community's goals and priorities that have set to date. So with that, let's see, we'll do this for 10 minutes. So I'm going to start a timer to get you going. And let's see if I can actually set some music. Julia, if you don't mind, drop the prompt into the chat again as well. But folks, let us know, come off mute and let us know if you're unable to access the question form. Do you hear music background?
No, and Van, there's a comment in the chat that someone is not able to access the link. Is anyone else having that issue? I'm able to access it on my end.
It doesn't show up as like a hyperlink, but if you copy and paste it into a browser, it worked for me.
I can't get in. Our network won't let us in.
Okay, I just post a direct link. Let us know if you're able to. 5 more minutes. Okay, just the time stuck again. The last 3 minutes. If folks want to jot down something quick, wrap it up. We'll share the link again afterward if you want to submit any more information. See some very great responses here. Thank you for all submitted. The longest 50 seconds of everyone's live today. And then we'll do some, okay. Well, if you're still writing, feel free to just to wrap it up and still submit. We're not going to shut down the form or anything, but we're going to move on a little bit. Thank you. Sorry, I was hoping I could have some background music to inspire you, but that didn't happen. So hopefully silence worked just as well. But I see we have a lot of great submissions so far already. So I'll just read out just a couple just to get everyone, thinking and knowing that your inspirations or your ideas are probably very similar across the board here. So let's see. The one I see here is the Neponset River watershed area is a thriving ecosystem, economy, and home to as many residents. The river itself provides plenty of undeveloped land to a diverse range of native plants and animals, stores stormwater and reduce flooding, and allow for passive recreation along its banks. At the time when we only had one cool zone location during the summer, we have been able to establish over 20 through private-public partnerships that can accommodate all of those that have health-related issues in the heat of the summer. We have been able to offset the cost for these locations through the use of solar energy and geothermal wells to reduce energy costs and consumption through various federal and state funding. That's really great. See another one. There are boats and kayaks all up and down the river. Folks are swimming at the town beach at Milton Landing. The Baker and T&H dams have been removed and all kind of new wildlife have made their home in the Neponset and its tributaries. New development have sprouted in Milton Village and Granite Avenue, protected from flooding by smart resiliency regulations. Residents happily pay their stormwater enterprise fee, and green infrastructure have turned our street into a lush paradise. That's awesome. Maybe one more. Minimal flooding and negligible water quality issues. Aging dam infrastructure have been removed, improving stream flow and reducing costly repair burden on municipalities. Corporations are being held accountable for producing excessive packaging, contributing littering, and have been forced to pay for historic water contamination such as PFAS. Definitely an issue across the region, across the country, actually. Okay, one more. They're so good, you all. There are trees and green infrastructure everywhere now, and gardens too, community and private. We have daylighted all the buried streams, and when we could reconnected them to the floodplains, we infiltrate everywhere. Every sidewalk is pervious paving, flood storage. Wheelchairs can hover now so that they're super accessible. Cool. We have new gray water plumbing standards so that we're infiltrating not just stormwater, but gray water too. And we're piping the water we treat at Deer Island back to recreational reservoirs so that it's not just going out to the sea and get the little bit of recharge there, which is so critical in these hot, dry climate change day. Fantastic. These are really great. We're going to, if you continue to submit these, please do so, finish and share with us. We're gonna make these into postcards and include and document it in one way or another so that it's there, something for you all as a collaborative to look forward to and remember what you want to see in 2050. So with that was sort of a teaser into what is the vision and objectives of the Neponset River Watershed Climate Collaborative. And, we have drafted some of this. Some of you have looked at the pre-meeting questionnaire, so you saw these language, and it's just based on the different documents and planning work that you've done, and we're sort of took a first shot at putting this together, but it's really nice and helpful to hear or read some of the visions and perspectives you have here today. And we're going to go back, look at these postcards as well, and make sure that we incorporate all of the key themes and topics we heard from this first exercise into this language as well. But since we have you all on the line, so we would like to share with you sort of as I mentioned, the draft vision and objectives for this collaborative. So what is the Neponset River Watershed Climate Collaborative? Convened by NepRWA, the collaborative represents a group of 12 municipalities that will work together through best practice and share experiences to enhance the region's climate resilience. It means coordinating on a watershed scale to develop and implement climate adaptation strategies to address climate change impacts faced by communities in the watershed, including extreme storm events, extreme temperatures, drought, and floodings, as well as a result of increased frequency and volume of rainfall. So here are proposed objectives of this collaborative: foster partnerships and collaboration to advance climate resilience planning and implementation efforts in the watershed, determine collective goals and priority actions, short and long term, to implement across communities, particularly through the lens of equity, to ensure just outcome and protection of those most disproportionately impacted by climate change in the region. Identify and pursue technical assistance and funding opportunities to support watershed scale climate resilience projects, as well as local resilience projects that will also benefit the region. And we draft this language with keeping in mind that, this is not, we're not starting from scratch. This is a built onto a lot of great leadership and planning efforts that each of the individual communities have done to date, at least in the past 5 years, or if not even longer. And Jeff will share with that in a hot second here, as sort of, all the great work that you've done and how we kind of start building from there. But before we move on, so now that you see this draft language, anyone has any questions or any thought, anything is missing in here, any key informations that we should consider adding to this vision and objective for the collaborative? Feel free to drop it in the chat or unmute and share with the group. Okay. I know it's not perfect, but I'm sure you'd need a little bit more time to think about. So we'll definitely find a way to share this again, and also something you can discuss in your breakout groups later on as well. But in the interest of time, again, if you have any questions between now and then, feel free to drop in the chat. But I'm gonna go ahead and move forward. Jeff, you want to take over?
So we started developing, as we started looking at the framework, and kind of we had to go back through and see what a lot of the towns have been done, and all the towns have been doing great work and doing a number of different plans. These are all kind of screenshots of the plans that we went through as we started looking at developing a framework, because a lot of the work's already been done, and we just want to consolidate it and kind of see what the similarities were between different towns. We looked at a number of projects, including master plans, climate action plans, hazard mitigation plans, open space plans. A few places had like heat plans in particular, and we went through those for all the different towns, and we collected those into the next document. Next slide, man. And this is, so we took a lot of those things and we put them into an Excel sheet. We were looking at the strategies that the towns already had recommended for implementation. And so we put those in based on town, and they have different strategies, different categories that we put them into. So things like developing a program for education on awareness and climate change impacts and possible preparedness measures. We put that into like an outreach education category. And then as far as what hazard, climate hazard, it dealt with, that one went to all of them. But some of the other categories we had were flooding, rising temperatures, extreme heat, drought, extreme storms. And so we collected, for each town, we collected a number of strategies, and then we broke them down into the climate category, and also the like implementation category, which is like a capital or policy change or design outreach. And we looked at those for each town. And then the next slide, Van. And so after we had all those into the Excel sheet, we went through to see what the commonalities were between the different towns, and also looking at not only the commonalities, but what things could be collaborated upon. So what would we be able to work cross town, cross municipality to be able to work on and work together to complete. And so these are this is like you'll see some of these in a minute, but this is just a screenshot of, we have extreme heat, air quality was something we're looking at as its own category, but combined it into some other ones. Drought and fire, which is also part of extreme heat, and water conservation. So we started going through those, getting rid of things, putting duplicates together, adding some categories together as we were going through the process to develop a framework of things that the towns already were working on. Next slide. And so why do we need a framework, and what is this framework for? We're going through this to look at what the watersheds can work on together, and then as we looked at that, to preserve and protect the watershed's natural and recreational resources that serve more than 330,000 people and 14 communities in Boston, and then the framework can be used to help mitigate as best as possible the impacts of climate change and climate hazards, and the effects they'll have on the communities. It's an opportunity to be proactive to the changes to what a changing climate, the effects that it'll have, rather than reactive and just as the flooding increases, just reacting to it instead of being proactive and getting ready for it in the future. And then to be more cooperative across borders. As Carrie said in the beginning, climate change impacts do not limit themselves to municipal borders. And as the impacts are spread across municipalities, it makes sense for these municipalities to work together. Next slide. And so we're hoping that this, as we continue to develop the framework, that it'll be used to guide climate resilience planning efforts, which participating municipalities have collectively committed to advancing and implementing, which is the process that we're working on right now, to provide the collaborative with a roadmap to help identify resources and opportunities for planning and decision-making going forward, and to help prioritize efforts and actions that will have the biggest impact watershed-wide, and identify possibilities for municipalities to implement them cooperatively. A lot of these things are something all the towns want to work on, and we think that within being able to collaborate on them and share ideas and other resources, that it'll help make a lot of these projects go a lot quicker and increase the implementation and the adaptation to climate change. Next. And so right now we're going to go through some of the priority actions that we've created for each of these groups. And there's a few different ones for flood mitigation. After each one of these, we'll be having a poll question, which will ask you to rank them on importance. Those will be a little briefer in their wording, but I'm just going to go through and read these and let you all think about them. And then when we have a poll question after each, and then you'll rank them there. So some of the ones that we found for flood mitigation were related to infrastructure improvements. We're assessing / upgrading aging infrastructure, including dams, culverts, pump stations, to handle more extreme storms, current 500-year or greater, and consider impacts of climate change. Flood-proof buildings and town assets prone to flooding. Identify existing septic within 500-year flood zones and transition or connect those systems to municipal sewer where feasible. Evaluate the feasibility of incorporating green infrastructure in all new development projects, and create educational programs to promote green infrastructure techniques and landscaping practices. To create an enterprise fund for stormwater maintenance programs including fee credits to incentivize stormwater retrofits on private property, and to ensure the maintenance of stormwater facilities and catch basins, which some of you are doing already. To identify projects with low impact development techniques and stormwater best management practices on municipal properties, to reduce the public, to educate the public, and examples can be rain gardens, porous driveways, and increased native plantings. To establish an infrastructure coordination committee with the region's major infrastructure organizations. The committee would develop planning and design standards / regulations aligned with up-to-date climate projections, identify cascading vulnerabilities, establish coordination mechanisms, and align adaptation efforts with other planning priorities. And lastly, identifying opportunities to share resources with neighboring communities and reaching water quality goals. Examples include purchasing equipment for water quality monitoring or stormwater facility maintenance. And with that, we have a poll question and we ask you to rank the top 3 that you feel are most important to your municipality.
Sorry, just to clarify, these are from the regional perspective. So they may or may not be the priority actions that was within your resilience planning documents today. But what we pulled together here are some of the overlapping priority actions that we have seen across the municipalities' plan documents, from the MVP plans to HMPs and things like that. And so this is definitely not a comprehensive list of priority actions for each of the municipalities by any means, but we're trying to capture here sort of the priority actions that would be for the region. Did you have a question?
Here, Rob's got his hand up.
Hold on. Yeah, what's an infrastructure coordination committee? I've never heard of such a thing. Is this modeled after something? And you think this committee has powers to set regulations? So what's your thoughts on that bullet? Did I come through?
Yes.
Okay.
Jeff or Carrie, did you have any thoughts?
I don't think they would be implementing regulations. I think they would help develop the regulations to work across different municipalities to kind of standardize what's being done.
All right, but what is a coordination committee? What is there a model from another state that you've created that bullet for, or is this just a brainstorming thing you threw in?
It's just something that was taken from some of more particularly from town, and I'm guessing there's some of these examples around, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I would say, Rob, I wouldn't we're not looking for something prescriptive right now. So the idea is there that it would help develop planning and designing standards and regulations to help the region move forward. And so if and when it moves forward into the implementation as a priority implementation strategies, that's up to the collaborative together to identify and define what is that community could look like for the region. Does that help?
I just have never heard one of those things before. I'm curious. The other comment I would make on this too is, the Neponset River has an industrial legacy. I don't know if this would fit with the septic systems, but I think mapping known, hazardous sites, brownfields along the corridor. I think all of us practicing planners are going to have to account for those down the road through permitting and design and whatnot. So it's an old industrial river. So we got a legacy we got to account for.
Great. Yeah. And we'll have in our breakout sessions, we'll have in a little bit. Those are the kind of questions we'll be asking of what we missed or what things that we would like to be added to these. So keep those questions in mind and we'll be able to write those down later. All right, seems like we have a lot of results. So the top few were assessing upgrading aging infrastructure, creating an enterprise fund for stormwater maintenance, and then to evaluate the feasibility of promoting green infrastructure. So thank you all.
Next one, Jeff.
Yep. So the second part of flood mitigation is prioritizing actions for natural resources, floodplain protection, and restoration. So these are protect and promote the preservation of wetlands, including restoration of previously filled wetlands and floodplain areas, developing strategies to ensure newly built parks and fields have flood control measures incorporated, consider the potential of using these areas as temporary flood storage, conducting a hydraulic drainage study that identifies the most at-risk areas to flooding under future climate scenarios, assess those areas for flood mitigation solutions, which is kind of we are working on as ongoing, redesign parking to increase efficiency, add landscaping and plantings where possible, expand and protect wetlands, whether historic or newly created based on stormwater management, consider dam removal and ecological restoration as a strategy to mitigate flooding, and identify and acquire land that is contiguous to existing protected land and with high value due to natural resources, wildlife habitat, water supply protection, or flood control, and include support for open space acquisition and protection as part of long-range financial planning. So we have another poll question coming up. And for this one, we'll also do the top 3 priorities.
Jeff, if you could just let me know when to end the poll.
Okay, we'll give it a couple more minutes. Well, 2 minutes, then we'll stop the poll. Actually, it seems like we have most of the results, so I think we'd be okay to stop now. So for this one, the top strategies were protect and promote preservation of wetlands, conduct a hydraulic drainage study, and acquire land that is contiguous to existing protected areas. Next one, and the final for flood mitigation, is priority actions for bylaws and regulations. This is a shorter one. These are to review and update stormwater bylaws to incorporate climate change and enhance consistency across municipalities, minimize impervious surface through revising relevant bylaws, zoning, and parking requirements, require new development to require a certain percentage of pervious area, require the consideration of future precipitation projections when evaluating stormwater structures or conducting drainage studies for repairs or proposed development. So we have the poll, and I think this one has just select one top priority from these. All right, few more. Right, I think that's pretty good. The top one here is to minimize impervious surface through revising bylaws. But the other two both got some strong showings as well. Next up. Next, we have extreme storm priority actions. And these are to establish a regional coordination system with neighboring towns for emergency planning and response, ensuring shared resources and quick recovery for critical municipal infrastructure during a major climate event. To perform a vulnerability study on transportation, bridges, and culverts affected or potentially affected by future flooding, including evacuation routes. Analyze future threats to critical infrastructure, facilities, and residences based on projections of sea level rise and intense storms. To include sections on sections on disaster storm debris management, hazardous material response, and more into emergency management plans. Develop an understanding of how climate change induced hazards could potentially increase the risk of accidents or spills involving railroad lines, and quantify the potential risks, particularly to the water supply that could result from accidents involving various classes of types of hazardous materials, minimize secondary impacts from hazards such as pollutant release. Develop a robust communication system to inform the public prior to hazard events and disperse updates during hazards. Communications should include issues related to water supply, road closures, evacuation routes, and cellular information. And then conduct outreach to businesses storing hazardous materials or other pollutants in flood-prone areas to limit storage near water or where floodwaters have the potential to reach storage locations. Poll question. For this one, choose top 3 priorities. And we do recognize that all these are probably important, and we're just kind of looking to help use this to help prioritize them in the framework. Give it a few more seconds. Right, looks like these are spread out quite a bit across the different priorities, with performing a vulnerability study on infrastructure, analyze future threats to infrastructure facilities as well, and then to establish a regional coordination system with neighboring towns. But all of them are quite popular. So next up, extreme heat priority actions. These are to minimize impervious surface through revising relevant bylaws, zoning, and parking requirements, require new development to have a certain percentage of pervious area. I mean, this is very similar to the flooding one, but they also deals with heat as well. To ensure adequate cooling and heating facilities in public buildings, ensure backup generators and or storage to maintain cooling, particularly emergency shelters and critical facilities. Develop dedicated programming and clear messaging for public cooling centers, and identify opportunities to expand network of free to access outdoor and indoor cooling locations. Enhance cooling in pocket parks and street to park conversions, integrate opportunities to add new green space into street improvement projects, and provide spray parks in neighborhoods currently in hotspots, areas that are lacking resources. Again, these are very similar, but if you could please pick top 2 priorities. Right, a few more seconds. It looks like the minimizing impervious surface is pretty high on a lot of people's lists, and then all the other ones are pretty equally important. Step. Drought and wildfire priorities. And so this is consider planting a variety of tree species that are wind, storm, drought, and or pest resistant. Implement groundwater reuse systems and encourage the use of rain barrels. Develop a regional brush fire mitigation plan, including emergency response and mutual aid. Require low impact development and water conservation techniques in new development and redevelopment to reduce water usage and add connections to the surrounding open space network. Work regionally to increase water quality and groundwater protection, including on private properties abutting wetlands or critical parts of the watershed, and identify and acquire open space in these areas. I'll have you choose 3 of these. our last one of these poll questions before we get into the breakout rooms. All right, looks like we almost all participation on this one. The top three were requiring low impact development and water conservation, working regionally to increase water quality and groundwater protection, and then considering planting a variety of tree species that are resilient to storms, droughts, and pests. All right, thanks everybody for doing that. We'll move on to our next.
All right, so as Jeff mentioned, thank you for going through that exercise just to get the group's kind of idea on what collectively, what are the top priority actions for us all to consider and think about moving forward. So with that, we will now go into smaller breakout groups just to give you a little bit more time to talk through kind of, do you agree with the top priorities that we just went through this exercise just now for each of those categories you saw, from flooding to extreme heat and drought and wildfire and things like that. And here in this breakout groups is also the opportunity for you to share any strategies that you think are missing, anything else that as a group, as a collaborative, we should consider as part of this framework. Again, thinking through as something that is, at the regional or watershed scale level that we can all collectively think about or pursue. And then if there is time, I would love to get a head start thinking about, all right, once we have narrow down the priorities list, then what are some evaluation criteria that we should consider or make to bring these implementation strategies into the evaluation process. So that is, if we have time, we do recognize there are many things to talk about within the next 25 minutes. So before we leave, I just want to share quickly here also the discussion guidelines, again, sort of the standards, make space, leave space, so that everyone in your group have an opportunity to contribute to the conversation, stay on mute, so that there's no background noise and things like that, and refrain from multitasking, and we hope to have your undivided attention in the next 25 minutes to really make this a meaningful conversation for everyone. All right, and then when we come back, we'll do a report out. So with that, Carrie, would you?
Welcome back. So I thought we'd do just a very brief report out of anything anything you noted that we should be adding, was missing, really whatever the highlights were from your group. Why don't we start with group 1, which I think was Declan and Jen.
Sure. So we have it mostly captured on the slides with the sticky notes and stuff, but I think there were a lot of discussions of like looking for support on how to pay for all these implementations and mitigation strategies. So that was definitely a common theme. I think definitely another theme was support in how to prioritize where to do these different actions, whether it's the cooling centers or floodplain restoration or land acquisition, like having some sort of a regional approach to where that happens and support with that, as well as I think another theme was having some support and advocacy around changes that need to happen at the state level with regards to bylaws and regulations. Yeah. And Jen, anything else?
No, no, I think you covered everything. Thanks, Declan.
Thank you. All right, 1 or 2 or 3 highlights from group 2, Andres or Len.
Sure. I feel like we had some similar points to what Declan mentioned. There were a few comments on how all of those actions are priorities in a way, so it's kind of hard to just pick one. But there was an emphasis on the idea of trying to hit the low-hanging fruit, some of the more less expensive priorities off the bat, and also trying to develop strong marketing pitches for some of the ones that might cost more, but you might be able to get some folks behind that idea if you have the right pitch for it. Len, did I miss anything?
No, I think that was it. Yeah, really caring about green space and resources and trees in particular came up a fair amount.
Great. How about group 3, Jeff? You had both jobs.
Just there was a lot. They thought that a lot of these were very good. There was talk about feasibility and also the a cost impact benefit where there's like this like upper range that you might want to strive towards, and then a low range, and then like what's the cost and benefits of possibly meeting someplace in the middle to help get projects done.
Great. And lastly, group 4, Van and Julia.
Hi, yeah, so we have similar conversations. Unfortunately, our group didn't finish everything, but that's okay. But I think in addition to some of the similar topics and themes already shared, I think a bigger picture is funding. And for one of the examples is like the enterprise fund, for example. So it's sort of like there's staff capacity, but there might be pushback from town residents, but also just sort of this limited funding. And so if there's the shared cost or something that can be at regional level to support across municipalities in the watershed, that could potentially help be more effective, help moving some of these priorities forward as well. Again, we saw that there was like that low-hanging fruit to address, so we try to kind of tackle that a little bit, and I think we agree with that as well, that for example, some of those are more short-term. And then one last piece is the communications that sort of like generally apply to all of the priorities that we kind of see, is that the need to communicate to residents about resources and things like that, but also building relationships so that when things happen, for example, if you live in one town, but really close to another town's border or something like that, you're not necessarily just evacuate within the town. It might be cross-border, sort of the same climate change impact that is happening as well. And so also whatever municipalities communicate to residents, right? Like there needs to be a trust, basically a relationship, so that when you share something, they'll be able to kind of understand and kind of work together toward, making sure everyone's safety, things like that.
Great, all of those are awesome. Does anybody have any questions or last thoughts? I do want to get you out of here on time, but we will be following up after the meeting with the recording, the slides, and potentially some follow-up questions. I want to make sure you guys all have a chance to get your in-kind hours in for this project. So I'll do everything I can to help you, work through this. So anyway, so the next steps for the framework, the climate adaptation framework piece of this this grant are the project team. We're going to go back with all of this great information that you all have shared. We'll have the steering committee review it, and we'll come up with a draft framework document for you to review before the next framework meeting, which will be sometime in May. As you know, the grant ends in June, so everything needs to be finished up before then. Questions about the next steps? All right. Well, you can always contact me or anyone on the project team with questions. Again, the project website is neponset.org/climateadapt. And thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And we'll be in touch soon. Thank you.